Hi, my name's Corinne and we're here at Dee's after another successful bead club. For this project we are going to make these lovely wire wrapped earrings. For this project you will need round nose, needle nose pliers and wire cutters, 18 gauge wire, 24 gauge wire, a bench block and a hammer, 2 decorative head pins, and 2 10mm beads. We're going to cut our 18 gauge wire at 2.5 inches long, and we need 2 pieces at 2.5 inches long. Using a 5/8 inch dowel rod, we will place these wires on the center of the wire onto the dowel rod. Pull the 2 tips around until they touch each other, and they'll spring back, and that's okay. We're going to do that to both of them. Make sure those tips touch. So now we've created our base of our wire form. Then we will place those onto the bench block using the metal side of our jewelry hammer. We're going to hammer just the ends of these 2 wires. Hammering takes a little bit of practice. You want to hit it pretty hard, but you also want to make sure that you come straight down with the hammer. If you're going at an angle at all, you're going to get a lot of nicks and bumps in your wire. So I start mostly at my ends here. I give a little more pressure towards the end when I'm hitting it, and a little less pressure towards the top when I'm hitting it. That's going to give me a little bit more of a tapered look. And because you're compressing this wire together, it's going to cause it to grow a little bit at the ends. So this side is going to have more nicks and bumps than the side that was up against the bench block. This side is going to look nice and smooth. So the next thing that we want to do on this wire at the end here, where we cut it with our wire cutters, it's nice and sharp. So we want to take a jewelry file or a piece of sandpaper and smooth those ends. So we're going to go at the ends of this with the jewelry file. I'm not filing this way. I'm going at an angle against the end of the wire. Give it a little feel. There we go. We have one more side. You'll want to make sure you're going in the right direction, and you can usually tell with your jewelry file. If I go one direction, I get a lot more resistance, which means I'm getting more of that wire filed off. Okay. So there's our wire form. So the next thing we're going to do is create this loop at the top of the wire form so that we can attach an ear wire to it. And for that we're going to use the 24 gauge wire. This part's going to take probably only 3 inches of wire, but I usually cut a little bit more, or if you're working at home you can work directly off of the end of your roll. We're going to place this about midway on the 24 gauge wire, and we're going to wrap this around the wire form about 5 times, and you want each wrap to be as close to the last wrap as possible. So as you can see here, I don't have any gaps in between my wraps. If you do end up with gaps in between your wraps, you just want to take your needle nose pliers, go on either side of those, and give them a little bit of squeeze, and that's going to connect all of those together. This is going to move around on you a little bit for a while, but once we get this completed, I'll show you a trick on how to keep that in place. So the next thing that we're going to do is use our round nose pliers right on the top of the form, holding on to the 24 gauge wire, and fold that over into a loop, straight down. Then we're going to do the same thing with this one. It helps me to hold on to that loop to keep it from disappearing while I'm wrapping. So I'm holding on to that loop with my needle nose pliers, and I'm beginning my wrap here. Again, I'm going to wrap about 5 times so that it matches the other side. Now on that one I do have some gaps in between my wire. So using my needle nose pliers, I'm going to cinch those together. Then we will clip off the excess as close as you can get. When you close your wire cutters together, one side is smooth, flat, the other side has a pocket. You always want the smooth, flat side to be towards what you're cutting. You're going to get a closer cut that way. Then use the needle nose pliers to push that tail down so it's not sticking out. You may have to go at it from a couple different angles until you get it nice and flat up against that wire form. So now we can attach this to an ear wire. We want this bead to kind of look like it's floating in between the wire form ends. So to do that, we're going to take another piece of our 24 gauge wire. Again, when you're working at home, you can just work directly off the end of your wire so you don't waste any. I'm going to place this about 1/2 inch up on the wire form, but directly in the center of my 24 gauge wire. And I'm going to wrap this onto the wire form from top to bottom. Again, we want our wraps to be as close together as possible, and I'm going to wrap about 5 or 6 times. And that's up to you. That's kind of an aesthetic thing, however you want that to look, whether you want it to be long or short, that's up to you. So then we're going to place the bead onto the wire, and as I told you before, there is a trick to keeping this in place. One of the things that's keeping it in place is the flattened wire here, but you can also take your needle nose pliers and give it a little bit of a crimp, and that's going to make it bite into this wire form and keep it from moving around on you. And you can do that at the top as well. So then, to complete this, we want to actually squeeze our ends together so that we don't have a gap and our bead doesn't move around in there. And we're going to do the same thing that we did on the other side. Of course, now we've got a bead in the way, so you've got to kind of force the wire in between the wire form and the bead to make it look similar to the other side. And what I'm doing is I'm just wrapping from top to bottom, just as I did on the other side, And every time I'm forcing that wire up in between the bead and the wire form. Once you get about 3 or 4 wraps, then it gets a little bit easier. Okay, so now I've got about the same amount of wraps on each side. I'm going to cinch that together. And then clip off my tails as close as I can get, and then push the wire down into the wrap so that's not sticking out. So the last step for this earring is we're actually going to make our own ear wire for this. We're going to start with a decorative head pin. Place the round nose pliers directly at the tip of the head pin, and using your thumb just roll that wire around until it touches the decorative part on the head pin, and that's going to create a little bitty loop at the bottom. Next, we're going to use, you can either use a 1/2 inch, you can either use a 3/8 inch dowel rod, a mandrel, or you can use a simple Bic pin. Makes the perfect size earring. We're going to place that loop that we just made up against the pin and wrap this around to create an ear wire shape. Now some head pins are going to be longer than others. If you like shorter earrings, you can always clip that end off a little bit. Just make sure that when you do your other one, you clip it at the same point. And then if you do clip it, you'll need to file that end. Now this on its own is not sturdy enough to be an earring, but if we hammer just this back side of the curve on the earring, we're going to strengthen that and keep it from losing its shape. Watch your fingers, because your fingers are going to be really close. If you have to, you can always use your needle nose pliers to hold on to it so your fingers are out of the way. Just make sure that your wire's directly flat up against the bench block. And you can see that I've actually got the decorative part of the head pin off of the bench block so that I'm not accidentally hitting it with my hammer. So that creates the ear wire, but for this you'll notice because of the decorative part on the head pin, now our ear wire is large, our loop is not going to fit on there. So when we open this up, just very gently open that up, we're going to slide this on from the back side of the earring and then gently reclose that loop. And there we have our finished product. Thank you for watching our instructional video. Please join us for our next video.